welcome back to part two of Just Ballin' with JB. This is Jordan Bradford here with Jeff Beck, and this episode is brought to you by D. Oliver Design. For all your commercial graphic design needs, visit doliverdesign.com. All right, we are back. This is part two of episode number 6, and we are going to quickly go through our fantasy football update for the week. So I am now sitting at 4-2 after a slow start. My team has really ramped it up after a trade last week that may have just invigorated my team a little bit. Got a little juices flowing on the roster by switching a few things up. Picked up a kicker when my kicker was on his bye week, and that dude from Detroit gave me all around great win for me. So my team is on the rise.
Yeah, that's nice for you. You put slumping for my team. I would not consider us slumping to 4-2. We are unfortunately tied with some chumps now, like your team at 4-2 after starting 4-0. But it is what it is. Last 2 weeks I lost 2 weeks ago by 2 points. I lost this week by less than 10. Was still the second highest scoring person in our league. Still sitting in second place and second highest scoring person. So, yeah, just an unfortunate loss. Played the guy who's number one in our league, and his team does look really good. Was very close. There were some moments where we thought I was going to be able to pull it out. Saquon Barkley only putting up 7 was a little disappointing. He's obviously been really good all year, so he's allowed to have a bad game. But, yeah, that was unfortunate. Still out Nico on IR. Obviously, I mentioned that last week. Ramondre Stevenson was out this week, so 2 starters out. Still had a good fight. The positive was, found my quarterback, I think, for the future. I had Anthony Richardson. He's been up and down and clearly out of the lineup quite a bit. I was not really willing to pick up just some average quarterback. There was like Trevor Lawrence, some of these guys just putting up average numbers. I picked up James Winston, thinking, if they drop Deshaun, he just could be electric. I wanted to kind of hit the home run. If someone dropped Caleb Williams, I don't know who left him. Was able to pick him up off waivers. He cleared on Saturday. Picked him up, put up nearly 30 points for me. So I think I found my quarterback. So that's hope moving forward. I can stick with Caleb. Unfortunately, they're on a bye the first week I pick him up, so I am going to have to go back to Anthony Richardson. Unfortunately, dropping to 4-2 when other people coming up to 4-2 doesn't feel great, but still like where the team's at. Still think we can make a nice run.
Yeah, long season, a lot of games to be played. But changing gears, moving away from football here for a few minutes, let's talk a little NBA. So we're filming this on a Tuesday night, and it's a week from today is the opening night for the NBA. So we thought we'd get out a little predictions on how we think the NBA season's going to finish up in the East and the West, and ultimately, who's our champs? So Jeff, do you want to start? You want to tell us who you think's going to represent the East and the West?
Yeah, I would say, why don't we do, I did kind of who I thought would get to the Eastern Conference and then who would go. So whether you want to do that as well, but let's do the East first and then we'll do the West. So I'll do East, you do your East, and then we'll do the West after. So in the East, I have getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, Celtics versus Bucks. So it's a little heart, little head, a little bit of both in there. So no fan of the Celtics. Could care less about I did like Jason Tatum coming into the league. Guy from Duke, like Duke. Throughout his career, I haven't been like a bigger fan than not. Obviously, some interesting things with him. But end of the day, Celtics were doubted all of last year. Even as they're winning, it's like, yeah, they didn't really play anybody coming in, but somehow they beat every single person that was in front of them, and they won easily. So, yeah, defending champs. I don't think they lost anybody of note that I was looking at. Obviously their star players are pretty big time star players. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. Role players, Kristaps, Derek White. I really like him. Drew Holiday. one of my
Mhm.
favorite guards in the league, just the way he defends and still finds a way to do everything else as well. So that team is still stacked, and I think they come back with even more motivation than they had from last year. Just again, the doubt they still faced throughout the championship run. And then, you throw in all the Olympic stuff. Whether that affects people or not, I guess we'll see. I just would have a hard time believing that Jason Tatum doesn't find a little motivation in the fact that these older guys, his own teammate who is a six man for a lot of the year is starting or playing in games that he's getting DNPs for. And Jaylen Brown doesn't get onto the team, but again, his player on his team gets on. I think they're going to be pretty motivated coming back on top of basically keeping the entire team. So I like them in there with the Bucks. I mentioned that's a little bit more of a heart. I like the Bucks. I do think though, there's been talk about him working out with Drew Hanley in Greece this summer. He works with trainer that works with Jason Tatum and works with Joel Embiid, was a big part in those two developing their jump shots and outside games. I think Giannis is going to bring a little bit of that into play this year. Watching some of the overseas stuff and some of the international games this year, I think he's going to look really good. Lillard, I think, comes back ready to roll, in shape, better mindset. I get he's getting a little bit older, but he's a smaller guy. So the body stuff, wear and tear isn't as big of a factor on the smaller guards. So I think he's going to be ready to go. And they got Gary Trent Jr. this year. I'm a big fan of him. Again, another Duke guy. I really like good size on the wing. Only 25 years old, adds a little youth. 14 points a game. He's a career 40%, right around 40% three-point shooter. I think he's going to be a really nice addition for them on the wing as Middleton's getting a little bit older. He's going to be a really good fit for them. They're going to have to, do it. Giannis is still young enough, but Lillard's getting older. Brook Lopez is getting older. Middleton is getting older. So the team is aging a little quicker than maybe we even thought they were going to be aging. So those are my two getting there. And then I'm going to, at this point, go with the Celtics getting to the finals, from that matchup there, just again, purely based on defending champs and what they're bringing back. It's going to be hard to take them out. So I'm going to roll with the Celtics getting to the finals from the Eastern Conference.
Okay, yeah. We're not too far off. I've got the in the Eastern Conference Finals. I've got the Celtics as well making it there for all the reasons you mentioned. I think for a team that just came off a championship, I would say that they are being pretty heavily overlooked just in terms of any conversation about them. They had a weird offseason with players getting slighted in a lot of different ways. So I think they're going to be heavily motivated to come out and show people like, no, last year was not a fluke. We are this team. So I definitely, think they're going to make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals. And as much as I would love to see the Bucks there, and I would really love to see them, get back to their winning ways. I've got to go with the Knicks in the Eastern Conference. So I think the Knicks did a lot this offseason that I really liked. I love the addition of Mikal Bridges. I think he's a really solid, kind of 3-and-D wing. He obviously, the chemistry between him and Jalen and Josh Hart, I think, that goes a long way. You hope to see, Anunoby should be healthy, should be back. The addition of Karl Anthony Towns. I think that that's going to be a really, really good team top to bottom. I think they are, if they stay healthy, I think they're deep enough to make a good playoff run and, be at the spot too in the regular season where they can put themselves in a good position, right? We've kind of seen the Lakers and the Warriors do this the last couple of years where I think they're a good enough team to win in the playoffs, but you put yourself in such bad positions if you're not good enough to get a decent seed. And you show up in the first round of the playoffs and you got to play the 1 seed or the 2 seed, you're just making it tough on yourselves. And so I think the Knicks are good enough top to bottom and deep enough to end up as the number 1 or number 2 seed. And the East is a weaker conference again this year. The trend has still been the teams out west just seem to have a bit more talent top to bottom. So I like that matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals, but I'm going to go with a little bit of an upset here. I think the Knicks are going to get back to the NBA Finals.
Nice. Okay.
I think they got a recipe for success here. I think Jalen Brunson's a winner, and I think it's a big year for the NBA if you get the New York Knicks in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think we're gonna, not to spoil my Western Conference picks, but somehow we did not even talk about these and end up flip flopping. Felt like I had to acknowledge it because when we talked about the trade that happened, I said I think the Knicks would be more likely to make a big run and get to the finals compared to the Timberwolves. And I think you picked the Timberwolves compared to the Knicks. So unless you do have the Timberwolves, which you may, I don't know what you have, so we'll hear it in a second. But I didn't take the Knicks going all the way there, even though that was my thought. Like I said, it was a little bit head and heart. I think I would take the Celtics over the Knicks and the Bucks. Obviously, that's who I'm taking as the Eastern Conference representative. So to me, Bucks or Knicks, could have gone either way. I'm just kind of chalking that up that the Knicks and Celtics are going to have to face each other in one of the earlier rounds. Bucks sneak into that, and then the Celtics go. But I was laughing because on the Western Conference side of things, I have the T-Wolves making it to the Western Conference Finals. So the way I looked at this was whether or not the West is still better than the East. I think that is a little bit more of a discussion now, personally. I'd say the West is deeper. I think that's what continues to happen is the West is deeper, like you said, top to bottom. I think the top heaviness of it, obviously the Celtics just won last year. If we like, the Knicks up there, the Bucks, I think they're right in line with the top three teams from the West. But I looked at it as I think there's going to be a younger team that gets there. And that's kind of my T-Wolves. I mean, I think Anthony and Edwards could be a MVP candidate this year. Wouldn't shock me. I like that trade for them in the one sense of I think it defines their roles a little bit more. I think with the Knicks, Jalen Brunson was still kind of ascending. Josh Hart was playing power forward and was more of a rebounder than he was. I mean, it was just a little odd for a little bit. I think they're fine tuning it now, but I think the Wolves, was like it was kind of Karl Anthony Towns' team and then Anthony Edwards. And I thought they did good, and they seem to obviously have a very good relationship. So I'm not trying to say anything negative about it, but I think you still run into some of those things where it's like, hey, is it my turn to go? Is it your, because we're not fully on the same page.
Are we sure that's not Gobert's team?
Well, yeah. There you go. I mean, Gobert's probably trying to get in there like, hey, I'm defense player of the year. I need to get my board. I need to get at least 10 points. I got to average a double-double to look decent. It had a little weird feel. They took out Denver, but then they kind of went out quick. They haven't really been able to gel. And so maybe this will give them that opportunity to kind of move forward. I think Anthony Edwards is the real deal. So I think we'll see him really break out from there. I think Dante DiVincenzo is a great fit for what they're doing. That kind of 3-and-D guy, like I said, he's made more threes than anybody in their history from last year. So I think that'll be a great addition to what Anthony Edwards is doing. He can cut a little bit. He can finish in transition, but he's really there to shoot for him, which I think will be big. Julius Randle, I think, is going to realize coming into the situation, he's not the top guy. He's not competing to be the top guy. Again, I think in the Knicks, he kind of was the top guy for a year. Then all of a sudden, Jalen Brunson came in. Is he the top guy? I think he's going to come in knowing, hey, I'm not the top guy. I'm next in line. I can create, do some things. So I like them as kind of being the young team that's going to do a little bit more than what they did last year. I'm going to go with, and again, kind of similar, a head and a heart one. I'm going to go with the Lakers as their last chance to really make a run at this. I just don't see LeBron being, I mean, we've already seen the last couple of years feeling like, can they really carry a team? Can they compete against these younger guys, as the long season goes on? I don't know if he's going to be able to handle that for much longer. I think he could play in the league another 5 to 7 years and still be a very good player. I just don't know with this younger talent and carrying a team, all these games, continue to do it. So to me, this kind of feels like that last hurrah. I got Bronny here. we're going to be able to play together. It's going to kind of rejuvenate him as like be a leader, show him how it's done, bring him into the league in the right way, whether it's playing harder defense, just having a little more energy. He obviously looked really good this summer. Maybe he carries that over. AD looked pretty good this summer. So I think those two are going to be feeling good. They're going to be a bit healthier right off the bat. Gabe Vincent is back right away. I'm not saying he's a world beater, but he was really good for the Heat. And he just didn't get a play for the Lakers. I mean, he was just hurt all year long, didn't get a play for him. So I think he'll be a nice addition with D'Angelo Russell. I think he'll kind of be a nice counter to that, a little more poised. D'Angelo's a little more up and down. Jared Vanderbilt should be healthy right off the bat. And then you got Dalton Connect coming in. So I'm not going to bank anything on Bronny James coming in, adding anything other than energy to LeBron. But Dalton Connect, I think, could actually be a player that could give him something right off the bat. That dude is size-wise, he can come right in the NBA, I think, and play. He's got a lot of skill. He's way more athletic than people probably would think he is. So I like what they got coming in. Again, they're a little bit of the older team coming in, but I think that's going to be a good battle. And then, I probably just, again, got to be smart on it. Same thing as the other side and go with the T-Wolves getting to the finals. I just think the parity across the league has just been really tough. So the Celtics are, I guess, kind of fighting that and saying, hey, I'm saying they're going to possibly go at least back to back getting there. The West had just, looking at Denver, I thought they were just going to be there nonstop. And then all of a sudden they get beat early on. And then you look at them and Jamal Murray almost seems to be kind of already sliding a little bit. And Michael Porter Jr. maybe hit his ceiling on there. And they keep losing like one key player each year. The Suns are just as old as the Lakers, and I just would trust the Lakers over the Suns to really push through one time. So, yeah, the Kings are kind of good, but I don't think they're good enough to break through. The Pelicans, I really like as a team, but they're just, again, I don't know if they can really break through and do that just yet. So, to me, I feel like it's going to be a very big toss up between all those. I like those two getting there. I think the T-Wolves got a little more energy, a little more youth in their game. I like them getting to the finals from the West.
Yeah, I like that. Funnily enough, I did not pick the Timberwolves to the Western Conference Finals, although they were, they were up there for me. So I had a harder time picking the Western Conference Finals, honestly, than I did the Eastern Conference Finals. I felt. I think it
Agreed.
just goes to show kind of the depth there of the West. It's just there's a lot of teams that I could see making a run. I mean, you've got the defending Western Conference champs, the Dallas Mavericks, that who knows, like, are they as good as they ended up last year? Are they better with Klay Thompson? There's a lot of questions there. There's, questions about Denver. As you mentioned, everyone thought that Denver was going to be running the NBA. And after one season, it was like maybe not so fast. And so I've got a young team, a young ascending team. I've got the Thunder in the Western Conference Finals.
Man, yeah, they are deep in the West. Jeez.
They're I mean, and the Thunder are a deep team too. They got a lot of skill, and they did the one thing they really needed to do, which was they got bigger. They got Isaiah Hartenstein from the Knicks.
That's right.
And I think he is going to be a huge role on that team. You're not going to see him in the box score, putting up, 25 and 10 or anything like that. But what you will see from them is they're going to be a lot more difficult to score on in the interior. They're going to snatch up a lot more rebounds. I love Chet Holmgren. I think he is an awesome player, but he is really more of a 4 than he is a 5. And last year they were forced to play him at the 5 because they didn't have any size. So slot Hartenstein in there at the 5, and I think that team all of a sudden becomes very difficult to match up against. And, not a lot's been talked about Shea Gilgeous-Alexander in a while, but Shea is very, very talented and one of the best basketball players, maybe the best point guard in the NBA right now. And he is just a solid player. I love that team. I think they're really, really poised to make a big splash this year. I think they're going to get to the Western Conference Finals. I think they're going to match up, though, against the Dallas Mavericks. I think we're going to see a Mavs Thunder Western Conference Finals, which is a rematch of the second round last year, Thunder versus Mavs. I really like what the Mavs have done in adding Klay Thompson. I think that they're going to have to change their offensive style a little bit. They're going to have to move the ball a little bit more than they have before because Clay's he's a catch and shoot kind of guy. He's not going to do a lot of dribbling. He's not going to, create a lot on his own. But I think it will change the offense in a way that they're going to get more easy looks. They're going to set more screens. They're going to be able to find ways to get him open. And he's a smart guy. He's a winner. You just hope he stays healthy. I'm not saying that Clay's going to be your number 2. He's definitely not. But I think, your window's getting pretty, close to closing on Kyrie's time. But I really like, the way Luka and Kyrie seem to play together. Luka, you got to assume is going to be pretty, motivated to get back to where they were, last year. So I like that matchup, and I think they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs for anybody because they've got some size. They might have the best player on the court any given night in Luka.
Yeah.
Which that helps a lot. But then I do think the young team's going to make it to the finals, though. I've got the Thunder making it to the finals, which means we're definitely getting another new champion in the NBA again.
I like it. Yeah. I like the Thunder pick for sure. The Mavs, I forgot to even mention them when I just mentioned a few competitors, but I thought through them. And I just, the way the West has gone, like I said, it really is so deep. I mean, I think the top teams in the East are obviously right up against the West. I mean, we saw with Celtics last year. I think this year will be no different. But I think that the depth in the West, and some of it might be that they battle each other, kind of the NFC North comparison. You take a little bit out of each other in there. I think the reason I like your OKC pick is I think they're going to be really good defensively. I mean, I think they're going to be good offensively as well. I mean, of course, when you pair those together, you make a really good team, but I think they're going to be really good defensively, better than people would imagine. They got Alex Caruso on that team. Shea Gilgeous is a heck of a defender in himself. Chet Holmgren, and you mentioned Hartenstein. I mean, the two big dudes inside, but Chet can obviously play outside. He's athletic enough to play on the wing, but he's tall enough to defend the paint, the rim. I think they're going to be really good defensively. I like that pick a lot. I looked at the Mavs. I don't see it. I feel like they're going to be one of those teams that, not saying that they'll never get back, not saying Luka will never win a ring, but, maybe not this version of it. I love Kyrie, but I think he's got to be paired with the right guy. Going with LeBron in more of LeBron's prime, I think worked out. They're the opposite to me of OKC. Just the defense, I just don't think is going to be there. You can't have both of your guards being pretty much defensive liabilities. I think they both picked it up in ways. You give Luke a lot of credit for doing as much as he can and giving a lot of effort, not frowning on the effort and what he's trying to do. He just doesn't purely have the athletic ability to keep up with some of the guys out there. There's only so much you can do. I think that's one of the Mavs' biggest downfalls at the end of the day. And I think that's going to be a challenge. And I think when that is your downfall, you're just a little more susceptible to going out a little bit earlier, no different than like Denver going out. I think they played some really good defense when they won the championship, but I think last year they were lacking in that regard. They lost Bruce Brown. That was a big piece of their defense. I think that just makes you a little more susceptible to going out early. And in a loaded Western Conference where top to bottom it's good, if you're 1 versus 8, you're not sitting there like this is an easy toss-up. 1 versus 8 in the East is probably like, yeah, one's moving on. Let's get to the next one. It's really kind of your top 4 that matter. The West, even your 8th team getting in, it can put up a serious fight against the 1 seed. So I think the Mavs will be challenged, but I like the OKC Thunder. I actually think that's probably going to be a tough one for both of the picks I said in there to get by. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah. Well, now that we've got our finals picks, I can go ahead and start us off. But so I've got Knicks and Thunder meeting up in the finals. And honestly, just, for all the things we just said about the Thunder, I think that this is the year for the Thunder. I think they're going to win a championship. I think that this is a team that is getting better every single year. They still have a lot of draft picks. So, the chances are of them adding more talent, at the trade deadline is very high because they've got a ton of draft capital to use to, get better around the margins. If they get to halfway through the season and a guy gets injured, they need to, just another bench guy. They're going to have a lot of resources available to them. And I just think top to bottom, they're a fantastic basketball team. I think last year they were too young. They got to the playoffs and it just, they just didn't play their best when they needed to there at the very end. But they could have won that series against the Mavs. They had a couple games where things got kind of cold late in the game. Mavs ended up pulling them out. And this year, I think, though, that the Thunder are good enough to win. I think they made the right adjustments on the roster. And I think it's going to be tough for the Knicks to match up with the Thunder. But I do think it will be a close series because I think the Knicks do have enough versatility on the wing to kind of match up a little bit defensively. I just think offensively, they're going to have a hard time kind of going bucket for bucket with the Thunder. So that's my pick. I've got Thunder over Knicks in the NBA Finals this year.
Okay. Nice. I'm going to go with, again, I mean, not a fan of picking this, but I'm going to go with the Celtics taking it over the Timberwolves, going back to back. I think this team I think it's going to have a different feel than what people maybe expected. I think people were looking at, is Jason Tatum going to be the face of the league? Is he one of the best players in the league? And I think all of a sudden this team is going to take on almost the opposite. Like we keep doubting them even as they're winning. And it's going to be almost more like the Spurs. It's like Jaylen Brown won the finals MVP last year. Maybe Tatum wins it this year. You had Tim Duncan, you had Tony Parker, and all of a sudden Kawhi Leonard came up out of nowhere. I think it's going to be more of this team-based win. Mazzulla, I think, he was a little, I don't know, quirky, weird, whatever people might have thought early on. And especially after, what's his name left that people loved after he got into a little love triangle himself.
Yeah, the Houston Rockets head coach.
Yeah, what's his name?
Yeah, drawing a blank on his name.
Yeah,
Ime Aduka.
there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, people really liked him. So I think Mazzulla was just more catching heat on that because they liked him than it was that he was really bad. But I think he's actually a pretty good coach. And I think he clearly can motivate the team. The team's behind him. So I think they're all there. I think their role player, like I said, I mean, I think it's going to be like Kristaps Porzingis, who you thought was possibly a star for like, he could be the New York Knicks star. To all of a sudden, it's like, no, he's our third, fourth, fifth, maybe option on our team after Derek White is an Olympian. Like, he might be the fifth option starting for that team after you thought he was going to be a star. I think it's going to be just a very good quality team where no one's going to look at Jason Tatum and think Kobe Bryant like his idol, which he was trying to be, but they're going to look at him like you're still a Tony Parker, you're still Tim, like you end up becoming one of the best because your team did so well. And we might not even really give them a lot of credit until they win 3. And then we're like, wow, that's a lot. And the parity, we've all talked about it too much. It's like a different champion for 5 or 6 straight years now. At some point, all those trends come to an end and you miss out on them. So I got a feeling, again, just with that motivation, like this feels like a year the Celtics get it done. Jason Tatum gets the finals MVP this year over Jaylen Brown. And it's just a start of this, again, I'm not saying they're going to three-peat, but they just are very consistent. And that's still a pretty young team. Drew Holiday, I think, is probably the oldest out of, the main guys on there. And I don't know, he still looks pretty good doing what he's doing. He's not like their go-to guys. Unfortunately, I don't want to say that, and I wish it wasn't the case. But if I'm trying to be smart about it, I feel like that's going to be my pick to beat them over the Timberwolves.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I was going back and forth with the Celtics and the Knicks, and just kind of felt like, well, the Celtics might, be burnt out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think what you say about the Celtics is right. I mean, they're just they're going to be one of the toughest teams to beat on a given night because they've got 5 starters who can drop 25 points. And they've got, and in any given night they could have 2 or 3 of them do that.
Yeah.
And they're that good. I just, I kind of need to see them do it again before I can start thinking, oh, Spurs like vibes. But you're right. I think they've got that sort of feel like the Spurs had, where it was, yeah, we've got some pretty talented players, but at the end of the day, like, it's really about like the way we play as a team. And so, I mean, they're going to be tough. They're going to be tough to beat. And I do root for Jason Tatum. I like him. I don't think he's quite as like the big star that I think a lot of us had hoped he would be when he got to the NBA. But I think he's, found a really, really solid role on that team as the guy who's, he's going to be your highest scoring player typically. He is kind of your best player, I would say. I mean, I still think he is. And I like Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's good. But I think Jason Tatum is a better player. He's just maybe not quite as maybe dominating when like you want him to be all the time. But I also think, he might have just been in a bit of a funk last year. And it's possible that, because if a couple years prior, I mean, he had some pretty big playoff games against the Heat. So, yeah, I don't hate that pick.
He's perceived as being like a little softer, but like then he also isn't at times. I think he's just kind of a unique player in that regard. Like Jaylen Brown seems to be like delivers in the hard when he's hard nosed. And Jaylen seems a little bit softer, and I don't know why that's always perceived that way. And again, last year maybe was a little bit of that problem or issue. I got that, but I think historically, I mean, he has been there. He's been there in big moments. He's done big things. I don't think he's, soft. He's he puts his nose down and does it. So yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, I like Jason Tatum. I don't have any problem with any of those players, but I'm not a Celtics fan, so I don't wish for them to do well. And obviously it's an early call on the Spurs setup. I just could see that kind of being the way they go about it, where there's not one player. Like you could say Tim Duncan is better than Tony Parker. I think that seems to be fairly unanimous, but Tony Parker was a top point guard in the league for a long time, and he's obviously considered one of the greats. Manu Ginobili is like one of the great 6-man. Like it's almost like a Derek White role. He was with San Antonio, came over to Boston. Like just has some of those feel that, yes, Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown will not be your, in your top 5 of players of all time at any point, even top 10. But as a whole, when you look at the wins they might accumulate, the championships they might have, they could be that kind of team. So, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, don't really want that to happen, but that feels like the smart money right now.
Yeah, well, it's just exciting that the NBA is back to getting started. So,
yeah,
we're looking forward to next Tuesday and the opening game. So,
sure.
Quick change of topics. Let's talk just a little bit of college football here briefly. So some big games over this last weekend. We had, of course, the Red River rivalry, Texas and OU, which turned out to be quite the dud. Texas just smashed OU 34-3. I mean, just, it was the kind of game that you thought it could end up being, but you just hoped that it wouldn't become. I think the moment for me in that game that was the most funny, I guess, from the OU side was as they were going into half, they stopped the head coaches to ask him, a couple quick questions, and they stopped OU's coach Venables, and they asked him if he's happy with the quarterback Michael Haskins, and if he's thinking about possibly putting Jackson Arnold back in, and he's like, no, I think we're fine. He's doing all right. And they go into the locker room. They scored 3 total points, and the 3 points they scored was in the first quarter. So I don't know what he was seeing, but OU's got a serious problem on offense, which is very unusual, very un-OU like. I mean, the Sooners are known for high-flying offense. Typically, they don't have any defense. And now they've got a great defense, but no offense. It's not looking good for the Sooners this year. And, Texas looked great, but it's one of those games that you don't really know how good you are when you're playing a team that can't move the ball on offense.
Yeah, you try and look at both sides, and like any of those games, you try and decide, who really was the one who did it. Does the team lose the game, or did the other team win the game? Where did it come into play? I mean, I look at that score, and I'm like, Texas scored a pretty good amount of points. 34 points is solid. College sometimes can get up there, but 34 points is good, and to only give up 3 is also really good. So, like, both sides of the ball
Yeah.
were good for Texas. I would just say I'm a little more impressed with Texas defense. Again, maybe OU's having some internal issues on offense that they're kind of creating their own problems. But when Texas is getting to them, they had 4 sacks. So is that some on the quarterback for not getting rid of the ball? Right, we hear that a little bit. The quarterback's holding on to it too long. They're waiting too much, or is that the offensive line? 4 sacks is a good amount of sacks. 2 fumble recoveries, for Texas. So I mean, I thought it was an impressive win for Texas. Obviously, they're clearly, the real deal. I was impressed with the defense, though. Like you said, OU typically doesn't have offensive issues. Maybe you put some of that on OU to figure that out themselves. But I just thought, yeah, Texas defense kind of, harassing them like that, not all game, was pretty impressive. To hold them to 3 points and still be putting up a decent amount of points on your end.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was an impressive win for them for sure.
Yeah, which leads to their next game this week against Georgia, which should be a really good football game to watch. So I'm looking forward to that. But before we get to that games next week that we're watching, or this week we're watching, another college football game that lived up to the expectations was Ohio State versus Oregon. And Oregon's now in the Big Ten, which is new this year. Ohio State, obviously, staple in the Big Ten. And it was a game that I think had 9 total change of leads in the game, and Oregon wins by 1 point. Ohio State could have won that game down the stretch. Couple small mistakes, but overall, that was a game where you saw 2 teams that are probably 2 of the best teams in college football play each other, and it was a lot of fun. I think that there's a chance we see that matchup again in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship, because
Yeah.
Ohio State's got Penn State, who's undefeated, but has looked up and down a little. Ohio State, if they go into Penn State and win and they run the table, they're going to be in the Big Ten championship game, and Oregon's undefeated. So I think Oregon's schedule looks pretty light relatively. So they've got a good chance at running the table as well. We might get a rematch of that, which would be phenomenal. And that's, conference realignment at its finest.
Yeah, that would be a fun rematch to see. Like I said, I mean, it's kind of Oregon's to lose at this point, I think, based on where they're at currently and their schedule, coming up. It'd be a fun rematch. I think, yeah, it was just great storyline to see them come from the West Coast. You know, everybody's got their pride in their hometown team and their hometown conference, and it's like, oh, we're the Big Ten, and we really grind and do this. And you bring a West Coast team in, and you say, hey, I don't know if you guys know how to handle what we're bringing here. And I thought they kind of did it perfectly. I mean, like you said, how many lead changes? So it wasn't like someone ran it up and then made a big comeback. It was back and forth all game. The biggest stat to me was, Ohio State had the ball for 43 minutes in that game to Oregon's 27 minutes. So they both
Mm-hmm.
seem to kind of they ended up similar yardage and stuff. Everything was pretty comparable. I mean, obviously it was a 2 point game or whatever it ended up being. It was very close, but you could kind of tell it was like Oregon brought in that West Coast style, score quicker, get the points on the board, score quicker, a little more high pace. Ohio State more, kind of ground and pound type of deal. I mean, again, stats were similar across the board, but when you see that time differential and the score being the same, it was kind of cool to see that you could bring in a little bit different style of play into this where people were skeptical, and you not only do it, but you succeed doing it. And now, like I said, all of a sudden Big Ten is yours to lose. So that'd be a fun rematch if we see that for the championship.
Absolutely. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up what Ashton Gentey is doing for the Boise State football team. So I don't, necessarily encourage you to watch a bunch of Boise State games if you're listening. You're going to probably not see a whole lot of close games, and you're going to see some teams there that you're probably going to wish you didn't watch. Ashton Gentey is doing some pretty incredible things right now, and he is on pace to break Barry Sanders' record of 2,628 rushing yards in a single season. He is playing incredibly. He's got 18 total touchdowns, 17 of those are on the ground. He's already rushed for over 1,200 yards in just 6 games, and he's averaging 9.9 yards per carry. I mean, this dude is an absolute stud. And you might be saying to yourself, well, if he's playing against all this weaker competition, then, does it really matter? He did play, Boise State played against Oregon earlier this season. And in that game, Ashton Gentey rushed for 196 yards, and they only lost by 3 points. So there's a good chance that Boise State will run the table, win their conference, and be in the college football playoff. And we will get the chance to see this team and this star running back play against another big name team. It could be a Penn State, could be a Alabama, a Tennessee even, maybe a Texas or a Georgia. I mean, only one team can win the SEC, and there are a lot of teams at the top that are good enough. So somebody's going to be hosting a first round game against probably a group of 5 conference winner like Boise State. So I'm really excited to see kind of how he does. And I think he's got some serious NFL prospects too, because this dude is NFL size. He's got NFL speed. He is the total package when it comes to a running back. And he's just doing something incredible and having an incredible year.
Yeah, it's insane to watch that stuff. A couple things that come to mind when you mentioned it. Someone I think called the Dallas Cowboys soft today, and maybe it was Jerry Jones on his meltdown, and it was like, you're calling them, you better watch your mouth, calling them soft, and someone had to clarify. It's like, hey, we're calling them soft relative to NFL players. I'm not calling them soft compared to you and I get any player on the Dallas Cowboys will come and kick my ass. We're not talking about that. We're trying to keep it relative to the sport they're playing and where they're at. I think you have to look at the same thing as Boise State. You might not be playing in the SEC, and I understand that is, in essence, a step up from some of the other conferences that are out there. It's still Division I athletes. It's still Division I athletes with coaches who understand that this dude is getting the ball, and we need to scheme against this guy, and he's still putting up the numbers that he's putting up. It's still really impressive. And to your point, it doesn't really matter who they played in the past. Based on the new college football playoff, there is a very good chance, if not almost a certainty, that they will get in and they're going to play somebody good. And whether they get smoked or whether they put up a good fight, we'll at least get to see them on a primetime, primetime game, which would be really cool. But the last thing I was going to share, which is really interesting, since we'll be getting into some bets here in a second, is he had minus 4,000 odds to score a touchdown against Utah State this past weekend, minus 4,000. So for anyone who does not bet, that means you have to put down $4,000, risk 4,000 to win $100 back. So you collect 4,100 after you risk 4,000. So God forbid they do scheme against him and he doesn't score, you just lose 4,000. So that's insane. A little perspective. I think McCaffrey last year, when he was basically automatic, a touchdown a game, I think his odds were like between minus 200 and minus 300. So you bet 200 to 300 to win 100, 4,000 for a shot this last
week. When you're averaging over 200 yards a game, I suppose you're eventually going to find some pay dirt there.
I mean, you're running the length of the field twice. You got to find the end zone at least once, you'd think, if you're doing that, right?
You would think.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to quickly before we get into our locks of the week. Let's talk games we're watching this weekend. On the college slate, Saturday's got 2 games back to back on ABC. We've got Bama, Tennessee. That's Saturday at 2:30. And then right after that, you're going to get Georgia goes to Texas for a big SEC matchup. So you got 2 SEC games. You've got what I would say are the top 4 teams in the SEC are playing each other. So only 2 teams are going to win. Bama and Tennessee each have 1 loss. So for both of them, they really need to get a win because a loss is a second conference loss for either one of them. And, same's kind of true for Georgia. They really need to go in there and put on a good show against Texas, but it's going to be tough. Texas is very, very good. And, I think all four teams are good enough to win the championship this year. It just depends on, how they're playing at the end of the season. So you'll get a chance to see all four of them if you just turn your TV on ABC on Saturday and don't change the channel.
Let it roll. I mean, yeah, nothing else needs to be said. Those are four incredible teams. All could win it. Top teams, and two teams got to lose. So those will
Yeah.
be a lot of fun college games to tune into. NFL side, first one, Chiefs Niners coming up. That should be a lot of fun to watch. Assuming the Niners are kind of on that comeback that we think they might be on. And obviously, we didn't get to see the Chiefs play this week, so curious to see how they come out after a bye week. 5-0. Haven't looked great, but they're winning the games and they're defending the champs. So, I think that should be a good game. I assume the Niners are going to be motivated to come in and prove something, get on this kind of roll. And again, do Chiefs come out flat after a week off, or do they come out motivated, rested, ready to roll? I think that should be a good game and give us some good insight, definitely on the Niners side of things. I think we kind of know where the Chiefs are at, but yeah, it should be a fun one.
Yeah. We've also got some NFC North action too. We've got Lions Vikings on Sunday at noon, and that one looks to be really good. Vikings had they had the bye week, so they've been rested, they've been preparing. Lions just came off of a huge win against Dallas, but they just lost Aiden Hutchinson, so we'll have to see what that defensive front looks like. Can they get some pressure still? And then also at noon, you got the Packers and the Texans play each other. So, that's going to be a really solid game because ultimately, whatever you think of the Packers and whatever you think of the Texans, we should get a lot more information about whether or not those teams are both contenders or both pretenders or one or the other.
Yeah, no question. A lot of good games there. I think they should all be close. Chiefs play a lot of close games right now. The Lions Vikings, that would be the only one I'm kind of skeptical of. If the Lions are like continue the motivation after the Dallas game, kind of play for Aiden Hutchinson getting hurt, and Vikings come out flat after a bye week, that could potentially get out of hand. I don't think it will. I think it'll be close, but I think Packers Texans are both hitting strides at a really good point. Similar teams in a lot of ways. So I think that one will be that one will be close and a lot of fun as well. Hopefully they'll all be close. But yeah, those should be some good games. On the flip side, negative game, maybe worst game ever this season for sure. Patriots Jags over. It's in London again, where they just played. I assume it's overseas, so it'll be 8:30 a.m. Central Time, which we were trying to do the math, and figure it out. So 7:30, 6:30, all the way on the West Coast. There are two East Coast teams, so I can't picture anyone west of us, even being remotely interested in those teams, even if they were good, maybe.
I can't hardly picture anyone east of us being interested in that game.
I mean, yeah, it might be literally the very top, north, northeast, and southeast. Those are the only two areas of the country watching it. But yeah, I forget 8:30 is not that early for us. But yeah, you start heading west, it's pretty early. I don't know if people are going to be tuning in a whole lot to that game, so that could be a pretty brutal game. I would not tune into that one if I was you, but if you're up, flip it on, might as well.
Yeah, we'll see if it ends up on my TV or not. But finishing up part two here, let's do our locks of the week. So first, we'll recap last week. We're as combined as a unit. We are 5-5. So we were 4-4 after last week. We are 5-5 after this week. We are trying our best to get into the green and really win you guys some money, help you guys get rich and get rich quick. But it's been a little up and down. I think we feel like maybe there's some things we're gleaning from these games now here going forward. But Jeff, you want to tell us what happened with yours and what you've got this week?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just not a good pick. I think we both said it. it felt like it had the makings of a decent pick. I mean, we kind of joke around about the new partnership with Kyler Murray and Call of Duty, but honestly, it kind of felt like that. It felt like, all right, what the heck's going on? It might have been a little combination of the Packers being a little bit underappreciated so far this year, and then the Arizona being a little, overappreciated, and partly just their division. I think San Fran hadn't looked that good, so we were kind of putting Arizona up a little bit from there. And same, almost the exact opposite of the Packers. Their division was looking so good, we were thinking they're falling a little bit behind. So yeah, I guess just not a good pick overall. They clearly got blown out from there. Packers look really good. Arizona did not look that good. So 5.5, 6, 7, none of it was enough. They were not going to make it happen. So bad pick on my part. Fall to 2-3. Need a good one this week. To be honest, looking through them this week, there weren't a whole lot that stood out as really good picks. I don't know if Vegas put together a lot of good lines. I don't know if just the matchups were a little interesting this week, but there were very few. Normally, I'll write down almost 3 or 4 that I'm like, okay, I'm pretty intrigued in all those, and we'll see. This one, I had a tough time even finding one that I was like, man, I'd consider locking that in. Not that I've obviously been right all that often, but either way, all that being said, I'm going with Falcons, Seattle. Falcons -3. I mean, this is probably going to be another trap one. Seattle's lost 3 in a row. Falcons have won 3 in a row, and it's probably not going to hit somehow. But I just look at that. Seattle is trending really negatively. They're not looking good, and to me, it feels more like we're just going to keep going downward versus it's a slight blip and we go back up. Falcons, I think, are heading the right directions. I don't put a lot of it on Kirk Cousins. I think he's obviously doing fine. He had 500 yards the other week. I think he's doing well, but I just think that team is solid. I think most of us thought that coming in. They started slow the first 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, that's not a good win when someone beats them. But I think the Falcons are a good team. I think they're solid. I think Tampa Bay is a better team even than we thought they were going to be. So I think those two are going to battle it out for the division. But I think the Falcons are a pretty good team. I think they're on a good roll. And I think the Seahawks are a lot worse than we thought. Like I said, those first 3 wins to get in 3-0 were just bad teams. My high school team sucked all the time. We lost our first game, won our next 3, we're 3-1. They were cheering, and then we lost the next 5 games to finish the year. And it was still an ugly season. So I see that being more the Seahawks' path this year. I think last year and the year before they were a little bit better than we thought with Geno. But I like that. I'm going Falcons -3 against the Seahawks. Lock it in.
I like that one a lot. Yeah, that was one I looked at and thought about as well. Glad I didn't pick the same one. But this last week, I was in the winning column here. I had Houston -7, and that was a lock all the way.
Beauty.
Houston finally, they got Joe Mixon back. They really started to play good football on the offensive side again, and they put up 41 points, I think it was.
Yeah, shout out to Bobby from our fantasy league, not starting Joe Mixon, starting Tank Bigsby over him. Tank finished with 2 points, I believe, and Joe Mixon was in the 20s. So shout out Bobby Ratchford.
Yeah, good job, Bobby. Yeah, don't leave Joe Mixon on your bench. That's bad advice, especially if he's playing. So yeah, I had Houston last week, and as I looked through the games, all I could think was, I want more Houston.
More Houston.
I want more Houston, and this week they're going to Green Bay. They're getting 2.5 points, so I've got Houston plus 2.5 against Green Bay. I think Green Bay's defense cannot stop Houston's offense. I think Houston's defense will create some problems for Jordan Love and the Packers offense. And I see that being a close game, but I actually think Houston's going to end up winning that game by 6 to 9 points. I think it's going to be one of those where, they're kind of in command of the game for most of it. It'll stay close, but they'll be the team that is obviously going to win. So I've got Houston plus 2.5, and I feel like I'm about to be 4-2. You're going to get back to 3-3. I like these picks, and I think if I were listening right now, I'd be locking those bets in.
Let's do it. I got a new pool that I'm just keeping track of, so I'm negative right now from this past week. I just started to getting positive this week. I got to deposit a few more funds, and we're gonna make some money this week. Let's go.
That's right. All right. Well, that wraps up part two here of episode number 6. Thank you for listening. And please don't forget to like us, rate, review, subscribe, do whatever you can to send this to people you know. We really appreciate it. And then feel free to shoot us comments or questions. We'll answer them here on the pod.
Thanks.